Good morning, bonjour, bon dia, buongiorno. Time to start our final conference of the BioValue project. This is, it gives you a feeling of nostalgia because of being the end or almost the end of the project. It's been 3 years, very intensive. But now we're here to share with you the various or many results, not all of them because there wouldn't be time, but the most important results that we got from our project, as well as, of course, the process and all the team. We'll come to the team in a minute, but I think we are all here, the various partners, not all the partners, but there's the co now is not here represented, but it's going to be online. But for now, I just would like to welcome you. We will have this whole morning dedicated to the conference of BioValue. And then we will continue in the afternoon, of course, with the remaining cluster conference, which I'm sure you will all be participating as well. But for now, let's talk about what was BioValue and what BioValue can leave for the future in terms of research. And with me, there's our project officer, Emanuela de Mena, and I thank her very much for being here with us, and also to have followed us since the very first day. So I'll pass on to you for some comments.
Thank you very much, Maria, and good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this final conference of BioValue project, and a warm welcome also to the people connected, to our participants that are connected online. As Maria said, my name is Emanuela de Mena. I work for REA, the European Research Executive Agency of the European Commission, and REA manages part of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe framework programs, which are the framework programs of the European Union for research and innovation. So it is really my pleasure to open this conference today on mainstreaming spatial planning in biodiversity. And I say this really from my heart because it's really special pleasure for three main reasons. The first is really on a personal note that by training, I'm a spatial planner. So it's really a topic which is close to my heart. And I really like the approach and the perspective of BioValue, which is spatial planning for biodiversity. The second reason that Maria just mentioned is that I'm the project advisor for this project, which means that I accompanied the project through all its journey from its start until now, until the end. And so it was a 3-year journey, and it was very intense. But as when we reach the end, there's always some nostalgic, of course, feeling, but also satisfaction, no, for what you achieved. And it is special because BioValue is part of a wave of projects on transformative change that were funded by the European Commission in research and innovation. And so it was the first wave of these projects that started 3 years ago. And we had just yesterday a very intense workshop with the other projects of this cluster. And now we have 18 projects which are at the core of the cluster, plus other projects which are very much interested in the topic. So I see also familiar faces here and around. What is very important is that the projects cooperated together, and BioValue was really at the forefront of this cooperation. And we see also the results of this cooperation and this effort, because today and tomorrow we will have this event is together with other 2 projects that are near their end, and other projects of this cluster. So other 2 projects, they have their final event, but other projects are also contributing. So we have 2 days, again, of very intense work. And it is very important to see all these brains that are working together for transformative change. So we really appreciate this. And then the third reason is really on the project and the content of the project itself. And I will not go into the details because this is what you are showing us today. But I really highlight and like the fact that BioValue worked for transformative change to happen in our regions, in our cities and territories. And we will see this morning these three arenas for transformation. And we will have time then to discuss. So as said, I will not spoil too much because we are all now curious and excited to see which are the results of the project. So my main recommendation for this discussion today is that, of course, this is a final event. So we are going to see the results and the possible impact that the project will have on the regions, but also at the EU level. So my recommendation is really to think when you present the results, but also when we are discussing what would be the legacy of the project, because the project, of course, is going to end. All the nice things also are ending, but what is important is what will stay. So the fact that the project is ending, and we'll come back on this, doesn't mean that all the results are stopping. No, it's the opposite. We really hope and really encourage you to keep on working and to think of the results in a way that they can stay longer and they can really inform the policies at the local, but also the European level, because what you did in the three arenas for transformation should be something that can be an example, something that can be inspiring for other territories and regions in Europe. So this is my recommendation for the discussion of this morning. And with this, I thank you very much. And I pass the floor to Maria, and I'm confident we will have a very fruitful morning together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emanuela. Can I have a controller for the slides? Yeah. This one? No? Can we can't put it over there. Okay, maybe I'll just have to come and change. Thank you very much, Manuela. Sorry, I was worried about the controller for the slides. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I'll now let me just tell you what's going to be the morning in terms of structure. I'll start by making a short introduction on the overall project. So what were the objectives, the methodology, the main inputs and the main outputs, so the main results of the project. Then we'll have two presentations still before coffee break on two of the main outputs, the recommendations and also the catalog for catalog of instruments. And then we have the coffee break, and then after we have the presentations of the three arenas. So MacPom in Germany, Trento, and so the Frasina River in Trento, and Mafra municipality in Portugal. And then we'll have discussion around that. Unfortunately, we don't have the final person that we were expecting. Where is Mafra? Mafra, yeah, he couldn't come after all. We were expecting an ex-mayor of Mafra municipality, who's now a member of parliament in Europe, but unfortunately he was not able. So yesterday he had to decline. So we'll have more time for discussion, and also we'll be able to have our lunch earlier, as we were planning to finish much later than the lunchtime. So there will be plenty of time for discussions and for to build, in a way, on the legacy of BioValue, as Emanuela very rightly suggested. At the same time, there's a video running on the site showing several moments of our project in different years. Thank you very much for Icons for this video. because I've been, while Emanuela was talking, I was looking into the video, and in fact, it's very good quality, and it's nice to see our colleagues, namely Jenny, who is exactly the person that should be here, and unfortunately she's sick and she's not here. She's online, but we wish she could have been here with us. The other thing I wanted to say before I start, even though there's going to be a picture there, but because most people are here in the room, is to introduce you, at least to those that are not part of the project, introduce our partners. So maybe I start with, with us, coordinators in the Instituto Superior Técnico in Portugal. I'm Maria Partidário, the coordinator. And then we have Isabel Lopa Ramos, Margarida, Jorge Batista Silva, Ana Sá, Ruth Martins, our project manager. Am I missing anyone from Portugal? No. Okay. Then we have, I'll go through the order of WPs. Then we have the Trento, University of Trento partners with David Geneletti and Leah Laporta, and Enzo didn't come, right? So from the university, that's it. Then we have UFZ with Ida Wittmer and Carla Locker. I don't say the rest. And Yuan Zhao is not here. Okay. So that's our partner from Germany. And then Denmark, exactly. Sorry, I jumped WP2. This was closer. I was looking at them. So Aalborg University with Lone Kornov, with Sanne Lassen and Emilia. I can't say it as well. Yeah, those are very difficult. So these were the academic partners, 4 academic partners. And then we had 3 practice partners. And these 3 practice partners include in Trento, where are they? Over there. Matteo and Frederica, exactly. I'm not going to try by heart the surnames, from Trento municipality that have been working on the Forsina River. We have Mafra municipality with Sofia and Carlos. I was going to say Carlos Cesar. Close. And Cesar. And they worked on the municipality of Mafras, the arena. And we have the CONOW partner with 2 Jennys, Jenny Kraus and Jenny Schmidt. Jenny Schmidt is the one that was showing up in the video a while ago, and that unfortunately is sick and she's not here. Did I miss anyone? I'm doing all this by heart, so it's not a big group anyway. Okay, but it's a good group. So we are 8 partners and it's been working well. Right. So I'll tell you now about what the project was, and sorry. Oh my God. I started with a compliment, exactly. Yes. Icons with our partner for, yes, exactly. Oh my God, Icons, I'm sorry. Our partner for communication, dissemination, and exploitation. Thank you, Chiara. And they do this wonderful job, as you can see, and also all the layouts and colors, very colorful project we have had all over these 3 years. Thank you. All right, so now I'm not missing anyone, right? Oh, and Icons is Chiara and Ludovica and Alicia. Yeah, but they're not here, right? It's only you and Ludovica. Okay, right, good. So let's start with the BioValue project, which has been a project started in 2022, July. So we are almost finishing, as you can see. It's been a 36 months project with 8 partners in 4 countries. So Portugal, Italy, Germany, and Denmark. and 3 arenas for action in all of these countries except Denmark. The main goal of BioValue, and this is an aspect that has made BioValue distinct even in relation to other cluster projects, is that we've been working with spatial planning. So we've been looking at how we could use spatial planning to safeguard and enhance transformative change in biodiversity through spatial policy making, planning, and infrastructures development, upscaling opportunities for increasing the value of biodiversity in line, of course, with the European Union strategies and in particular the Biodiversity 2030 strategy. So this, I'd like to emphasize very much this aspect because of course, the project is about biodiversity, but it's not biodiversity directly, but it's biodiversity indirectly. So exactly trying to reach out to the causes that determine the various effects and losses of biodiversity. 3 main objectives. Understand how biodiversity has been considered or is being considered in spatial planning processes in different contexts. So that's why we had the 3 arenas. And even though Portugal and Italy are both Latin countries, so with a relative similarity in terms of culture, they are nevertheless different because they have their specific spatial planning systems. Germany, of course, is a different culture as well and different nature of spatial planning. So that's how we tried to cover different aspects of spatial planning policies and contexts. Second objective was to explore and improve the transformative capacity of 3 types of instruments, and that's another aspect that distinguishes BioValue, is the instrumental perspective that has been adopted in BioValue, where we adopted spatial planning and management instruments, environmental assessment instruments, and economic and financial instruments to explore how in their own right, so by themselves, but also in combination, in combined action, how they could potentiate, how they could increase and this potential for transformative capacity in spatial planning. So we were working in the context of spatial planning, using spatial planning and management instruments, environmental assessment instruments, and economic and financial instruments. And then analyze and initiate somehow the process of change in spatial policy and planning processes to enhance biodiversity values. And that is another aspect that I haven't emphasized yet, but that is from where the name of the project comes, which is to look into the increase of the value of biodiversity. So the project has been mainly looking, of course, indirectly looking at the causes of loss, but with the purpose of increasing, enhancing the value of biodiversity. So creating transformative change to, or creating or generating conditions to potentiate transformative change in order to increase the value of biodiversity. So these are the 3 main distinctive aspects of BioValue. A, it operates or it runs in spatial planning contexts, and spatial planning, even though I'm going to mention that as again, is very important because spatial planning is like a platform where all different sectors come together, because all sectors, energy, agriculture, forestry, tourism, industry, they all happen in the territory. They all happen in the space. So when we deal with spatial planning, we are in fact creating conditions to anticipate the capacity to influence sectors. And that's one of the reasons, or maybe the main reason, why we chose spatial planning to run this project. Second aspect was the integration of instruments, or the capacity to put the three instruments to work together rather than in isolation. And we'll come back to that again. And third aspect is the value of biodiversity as the main focus of the project. How we can create value so that stakeholders recognize the value and therefore they're interested in safeguarding biodiversity, okay? This is us in different moments. Guess which was the first meeting? When everybody was enthusiastically waving. That was the first one. That's why I decided to keep the photos. I didn't choose one because I found it interesting that as time goes by, you know, we become a bit more. But nevertheless, the last one on top, the one on top is the last one. And it is set in January this year. So these are the various partners. I have already introduced the individuals, but here is the organization. So the academic partners with 4 universities plus the research center, the 3 academic partners or case study partners, 2 municipalities and 1 consulting, and ICONS as our dissemination partner. Okay, so let me tell you now about some of the main BioValue methodological inputs. And mind you, some of the things I will refer here will then be further detailed by both Heidi Wittmer and Lone Kornov in one presentation about the recommendations, and then by David Geneletti and Leah then on the catalog of instruments. So first, the structure of the project. We had 6 work packages, but of which the most important were the first 4. So we had 1 work package per instrument. So of the 3 instruments, there was 1 team dealing with each of these instruments. First, to do the benchmarking. So Trento was leading World Package 1 on spatial planning and management. Then Aalborg was responsible for environmental assessment instruments in World Package 2, and UFZ was responsible for economic and financial instruments in World Package 3. So all initiated with benchmarking to explore how the different instruments have been used so far, what was the state of the art regarding the capacity to, or the potential of these instruments to enhance biodiversity. And then the effort subsequently was to link it together. So they searched for the potential, they identified the gap analysis, and then they after attempting to bringing the instruments together and working the instruments together, then come up with recommendations and what are the instruments and what are the capacity of the instruments to enable the transformative change, which was then work package 4, where we all then came together to make up or to conclude and create in a way the legacy of this project. It was also in work package 4 that we had the arenas running. So all the work with the arenas were part of this work package 4. And then of course, the 5 and 6 was communication, dissemination, and management. So these were the 3 instruments, as I already mentioned a few times. And as I said also, we first looked at the different instruments individually and then in combined action. So how could we potentiate the transformative change capacity by bringing the instruments together? And we will see how we manage to bring that to an outcome. These were the three arenas. So we have the arena in Mafra municipality, in Trento municipality, even though in Trento is focusing on a river, so the Fersina River, and how that case was enhanced in terms of the improvement of the river and the capacity to enhance biodiversity. And in the MacPom, which is the nickname for that, for the name of the region, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. I'm sure that my colleagues from Germany will be able to say this more properly in what was about a different topic, the re-wetting of peatlands, a process that also generated a lot of possibilities and a lot of interesting discussions about the prioritization from the stakeholder perspective, about the potential to actually enhance biodiversity and how to get the policymakers to engage into that process. And on these arenas, we'll have after coffee a presentation by each of them, and I call attention for that because it's the actual application of what we've been looking at from an academic perspective. This is only to show that the three arenas attempted to engage the various instruments, okay? So we'll see, and I, of course, will not be commenting anything at this point, so let's wait to see from them how this was actually achieved. In terms of the arenas per se, let me just share here a bit of the methodology that was developed. We looked for this was different guiding principles for the arenas to be able to be driven through their process with the need to show change and the impact that this instrumental perspective could create. They need to show diversity and interaction, which I'm sure all of them have results to share, and integration of different perspectives. The capacity also to have the involvement of different stakeholders in co-design, co-production, action-oriented processes, very much context-driven. So that's why it will be interesting. It's interesting to see the results because they're so different, the different types of cases and arenas that we can see the role of the policy context, the role of culture, the role of the planning process itself. It was a process of knowledge brokerage. So in terms of production of new knowledge and learning processes, and we hope that it will be possible to scale up and scale down and scale out, and the results of these arenas. And this is the methodology that they followed, which was very much also influenced by some of the scientific findings that were developed by the different work packages in different instruments. So start by problematizing, envisioning, setting an agenda, then taking action, then reflecting and evaluating, and then scaling up and out. So I'm not going to detail as my time is running, but I'm sure, but I want to leave this here for you also so that you can follow their presentation and how they've been addressing each of these stages. This was also an input, a very important input in our project, the framework for transformative change in biodiversity, which was developed by Heidi Wittmer and colleagues in the UFZ in 2021. This was originally applied to global commons and was then adjusted or adapted to spatial planning and biodiversity and BioValue. but the building blocks and the idea will be detailing that in our presentation. The building blocks were like the structure that was followed then to look into the recommendations and what was needed for as an output. This was also a framework that was important and influenced in a way the approach to the arenas. This was developed by Trento team. In fact, by the whole work package one in the initial deliverable. And they came up after the benchmarking, after the review of the literature and cases. They came up especially with these characteristics of transformative change, restructuring, path shifting, innovation, and multi-scale. Here, let me come back. We had already the vision, we had the transformative knowledge, transformative dynamics, emancipation and agency, and the governance, the transformative governance, actors and interventions. So all these blocks were important in building up the whole process and namely the approach in the arenas. We developed a spatial planning process because there was really no general spatial planning process with various different stages. So why acting, so policy agenda and priorities, the vision, the objectives, the diagnosis, so learning about current situations, the design of a strategy, then making proposals, then putting these proposals into actions, policy planning, project actions, then implementing, and then evaluating what has been done before starting again with the agenda, the policy agenda and priorities. So in a continuous cycle with, of course, always collaborative governance, engagement, and co-creation fitting in the whole spatial planning process. This was also like an input, a basis for the thinking that was going on in the project. I just highlighted here the three ambitions that were together with the framework, the initial framework from 2021, because these three ambitions were not from 2021, were applied to the BioValue. And I know that Heidi is going to address and specify, but these were very important to drive the whole work of, namely of the arenas, so that the arenas, and hopefully it will be visible in their presentation, how they have addressed three ambitions being spatial planning, enhancing biodiversity, spatial planning contributing to responsible consumption and production, and spatial planning significantly contributing to socioeconomic inequalities. So like vision, ambitions, this is where we want to get. Okay, now the key, so all of these were like either produced during the project or were already existing and adapted to be used in the project. So we're like inputs for the project. And now what are the main outputs? And this is part of what we hope will be the legacy as the starting point for other projects, or even better, not better, but also for practice, for future planning processes that can put this into practice. So one is the recommendations. There were 14 recommendations that were developed. Recommendations that address three different scales. One is the contextual scale, so the context of the spatial planning, strengthening capacity of the spatial planning process to enhance biodiversity. So like governance issues and the political context, namely European, international context, the existing institutional capacities to generate spatial planning with a potential for enhancing biodiversity. Second, the spatial planning process altogether in its various stages, as we saw before, in a cycling process. And third, looking at within spatial planning, how change can be embedded in each of the stages of spatial planning. So this will be detailed by my colleagues in the next presentation. And the other output is the catalog of instruments, which, so as I said before, there was a benchmark. So there was a number of instruments that were identified from practice and that were put together and selected in terms of what the potential they had to play that role of in incentivizing or creating conditions for transformative change. And we have then categorized the instruments according to their function in 6 main functions: information, planning and project design, incentives, agreements, regulation, and enforcement. So these were the 6 categories that we came up in the end after a lot of different meetings and discussions in presence online. And also a categorization by objectives and needs. So land ownership, performance and standards, funds for conservation, public services administration, practices, awareness and engagement, sustainable business products. So these were the 2 criteria for categorization. And just to give you an example, oh my God, this is not even readable. Anyway. Can we, can read it? But the first stop, can we remove that Zoom band? Anyway, I picked up on 2 from the catalog. I just picked up on 2 just for you to see the type of instruments, but also the categorizations on the side. No? No, that's okay. That's okay. So anyway, yeah, so there was transfer of development rights, performance-based approaches, just 2 examples. One being a agreement kind of instrument, and the second regulation. Then from environmental assessment, just 2 examples: formulation of alternatives, mitigation hierarchy, also as awareness and engagement of formulation of alternatives, and practices the mitigation hierarchy as planning and project design and incentive instruments. And from the economic and financial, the voluntary donation sponsorships as agreement kind of instruments, and funds within the category objective of funds for conservation, and then fines, penalties, and legal liabilities as an example of a practice, example for, or instrument for practice, and mainly with the function of regulation. So as I said, there was several, I can't remember now exactly the number of instruments, but there were like an average 15 to 18 instruments in each of the different type of instruments. All of them have this description of what they can achieve, what is their role, and then what is their category. So how they can be used for what function and how they can be used for what objective. So this is one of the outputs from BioValue that we have exchanged a lot and interacted a lot with the arenas exactly to see to what extent this could be useful for their practice. And now I can't move this for some reason. You want to do it? I want to move for the next slide. Okay, it's moved more than needed. Okay. Right, so we have this band here all the time. And anyway, this was just to give you an example of another.
see it online. It's just, I don't know
Yeah,
why,
but I'm worried about people in the room. Not so much online. It's over there. Okay, in case you want to look at that without the button. Just to give you a brief shot about another output that was produced, a cards game to play. Even this is not the final version of the cards, but it's almost final. We have, in fact, also played with this game, in which the idea is to create more awareness, create more familiarity of the different stakeholders, namely in different settings, in municipalities. We did this namely with the arenas, and I'm not sure if it was done with other stakeholders outside of the arenas, but maybe it was, yeah. Isabel was responsible for developing this cards game. So there was 54 instrument cards. We have now less than 54. So, but at the time it was 54. And there was also some open cards to be able to complete. And the idea was to, so we have like the pink, and so the blue or purple was the spatial planning and management instruments. The pink was the environmental assessment instruments, and the yellow were the economic and financial instruments. And the idea here is in a given situation, in a concrete situation, how could you combine the different instruments to be able to enhance biodiversity value? Okay, so this is the form of in a way, dissemination, in being creative in specific contexts and helping people to actually understand. And this is one of the outputs of the application in Mafra, to look into different relations between different instruments and whether this would create synergies, would create benefits, would create alliances between different stakeholders to actually put these instruments in motion. Okay, so this is like the last. So there's three main outputs of the project: recommendations, catalog of instruments, and the card game. So just to conclude, I said, well, in the beginning, this would be to also reflect about the project, and I must make a declaration here, which is these reflections are mine because I didn't have time or maybe it would be, I wanted them to be my reflections as well. So please, when listening to this, don't take this as the project at this moment. Maybe they will become conclusions of the project or not. They have to be acknowledged by all, but these are my reflections. One is that spatial planning can potentially enable sectors coordinated action and policy coherence, and be a change agent in transformative change, because exactly of the capacity of spatial planning to bring together and articulate different sectors in the space, in the territory, which is also where biodiversity occurs. So spatial planning actually creates an excellent way or excellent form of addressing the biodiversity issues, and especially to enhance biodiversity value. So this is one of my reflections. Second is that silo thinking is perhaps one of the main barriers to transformative change for biodiversity enhancement. And this happens at various levels, European, international, national, regional, local, municipal, and also for various groups of actors, nobody excluded. So this silo thinking is really a problem. And yesterday, in fact, in the meeting we had of the cluster conference, this came up very strongly, and this is something that became very obvious in this project as well, despite the efforts that the team these in overcoming this silo problem. So this is something definitely that needs to be addressed because of the impediments that it's creating to transformative change. Third, we need to see or show evidence of the value of biodiversity benefits beyond the legal obligation. So biodiversity in most countries or in most regions continues to be addressed because it has to be, because you need to tick the box, because legislation forces, because authorities will not allow it to proceed any project if biodiversity issues are not addressed. Fine, but if we actually look at it and if we actually show the evidence of the value and the benefits that biodiversity represent for a number of activities and communities, then we will be able to contribute much better to reveal this strategic approach to biodiversity value. And finally, the views, structures, and practices. And as I was thinking about this, I thought that this image would reveal the views of New York, the structure of the Imperial State Building, and the practices of the workers. And if this was a moment in the process of building one of the most outstanding buildings in the world, which was an extremely successful process of building. And you read the description about the Empire State Building, and it has been a success in terms of construction and building process, then I'm sure that if we follow this IPBES framework and strong message, we'll be able to also achieve and make a very good work with biodiversity value enhancement. And that's what I wanted to show to you. I think that we could perhaps, I don't know if there's any burning question. If not, we'll just continue with the other presentations. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I've taken notes with me today because we have limited time and I would like to save time for questions as well. My name is Lone Kanu and I've had the pleasure of leading work package 2, but what I'll present today together with Heidi Wittmer from UFZ is the recommendations and how they relate also to the transformative change framework. We will start with the recommendations along the spatial planning process, which I will present. Then Heidi Wittmer will take over and follow with how these links to the leverage points and the roles of key agents in that transformative change process that Maria has neatly outlined in the first presentation. You've seen this little figure just before, and now I will go into detail with them. Because what we did was to support the change for transformative change for biodiversity. We have developed 14 recommendations, targeted recommendations that are organized across these 3 interlinked arenas or areas that you see here in the figure. First, we have the enabling factors, the enabling recommendations that lies outside the planning process. So even though the focus is on spatial planning, we also have factors that are very influential and contextual for all spatial planning processes. So these includes the governance frameworks, the institutional capacities and policy settings that influence planning outcomes. Second, at the center, we have, we focus at the planning process as a whole, specifically how biodiversity can be embedded into the key planning instruments, and that includes the legal, financial, and spatial tools. Thirdly, we zoom into the stages of the planning process, showing how biodiversity can be embedded from the vision setting to implementation and ongoing evaluation, making the process both adaptive but also responsive. So together, these recommendations from the project aims to reshape both the internal mechanism of planning, but also the broader structures of governance, enabling biodiversity relevant transformation across the different levels. So in the next few minutes, I will briefly walk you through these 14 recommendations. And for a few of them, there the logic or potential is particularly systemic. So I will share also a few illustrations along the way or examples from our projects to make them more tangible. So first, let me begin with the first group, 5 recommendations that is outside the formal planning process, yet they are very essential to enabling transformative change for biodiversity. Firstly, we need to shift the mindset from simply minimizing harm, and I'll return to that point later, to actively achieving a net gain biodiversity. This means embedding biodiversity goals across planning, taxation, agriculture, and conservation, also the sectors that Maria touched upon previously. Second, we also need to adopt systems thinking. Tools like causal loop diagrams can help us in that system thinking to uncover the hidden dynamics that we see, the feedback loops and root causes that behind biodiversity loss, so we can intervene more effectively. This is the illustration here. I won't dive into it. It just illustrates how we have different feedback loops, and we need, in order to really capture the root causes and the solutions of biodiversity loss, we need to have that systemic understanding, which is tricky, I think, for all here, for all of us. Third, we recommend also strengthening the regulatory framework. One of the topics that we touch upon in the project is the formal environmental assessment instruments that we have in the EU, the SCA and the EIA, Strategic Environmental Assessment and Environmental Impact Assessment. They need to evolve not just to mitigate negative impacts, but to formally also include biodiversity enhancement as a clear requirement, which is not the case at the moment, which is also reflected in one of the posters that we have brought here today. Fourth, we also call for better alignment of fiscal and economic tools, for instance, using tax incentives or funding transfer to promote biodiversity positive actions, especially at the local level, as you also see in the arena cases. And fifth, we urge the creation of multi-level monitoring systems to track progress across the scales and also the different sectors. This means also robust data systems and long-term capacity building for doing that. So together, these 5 actions build the enabling, you could say, conditions for transformative change by aligning our incentives, institutions, but also maybe especially our way of thinking. Let's now move to the second group of recommendations. These focus on how biodiversity is handled within the planning process itself. First, we stress the need for empower and build capacity. This includes equipping planners, assessors, but also stakeholders more broadly with the knowledge, the tools, and the mandates to work with biodiversity in a meaningful and forward-looking way. Second, we stress the need to integrate biodiversity concerns early, and especially through the strategic environmental assessment that are formally required for spatial planning, so that priorities like habitat connectivity or ecosystem restoration are embedded from the outset and not something that we add later in the process as a kind of mitigation, but really early at the outset. Third, it's critical to ensure the planning, to ensure planning and policy cohesion. So strategies needs to align across sectors and governance levels with clear roles, financing, feedback loops from project to broader planning. Fourth, or ninth here, we must address cumulative impact. Biodiversity loss often results from small and incremental changes, especially when it comes to, and here planning has a very specific role to play. But yeah, so again, like the system thinking, but also systems that we all know of, the GIS, can help us to grasp these patterns across time and space. Finally, in this second category of recommendations, we recommend a more proactive use of the mitigation hierarchy. The mitigation hierarchy is widely implemented across different systems in different countries, and so also in the European context. So as shown in this figure here, this means starting with the avoidance and then applying the hierarchy systematically from strategy to enforcement. But doing so support not only mitigation, but also real opportunities for biodiversity enhancement. And currently, this is not mandatory in the European context. And this is also one of the things that we stress, that we need to go beyond mitigation, but actually enforce also the need for enhancing, considering the decline of biodiversity, despite the mitigation hierarchy has been in place for so many years within spatial planning. So together, these actions help embed biodiversity across all stages of planning, not as an afterthought, but really as a guiding principles for planning. Whoopla. Finally, we come to the final set of recommendations, the last 4, and these focus on how biodiversity can be integrated across stages of the planning process, from the early vision stage to monitoring. And here we have the first recommendation is that biodiversity needs to be part of vision building from the outset. This means framing challenges and opportunities with biodiversity in mind, not as a constraint, but really as an opportunity. So something that guides ambition in planning. And the illustration here you see is from environmental assessment, but it's really just an illustration. The illustration you see, the late versus the proactive, highlights this point. When assessment or any type of decision support in spatial planning is introduced too late, it has little influence. That we know from research, but when it's embedded early, it can actually shape the very foundation of a plan. And this applies to any action. Timing matters in all aspects of spatial planning. Second, we also emphasize the broadening of baseline studies. This includes data not just on species, but also on ecosystem services, connectivity and pressures. And just as importantly, that data must be effectively used in the later stages of planning, not just collected and forgotten, but really embedded throughout the spatial planning process. Third, we also recommend improving the use of scenarios and alternatives. Strategy formulation needs to explore real biodiversity positive futures and clarify the trade-off that are involved so that choices are better informed. Fourth, the final one here is that monitoring must be action-oriented. That means tracking that matters for biodiversity, supporting adaptation and linking insight back into planning practice. So together, these recommendations make biodiversity, you could say, like a continuous priority from the outset of spatial planning. So really from the early agenda setting all the way to implementation and follow-up. I will now hand over the word to Heidi Wittmer, who will walk us through the recommendations and how they align with the very well-known Meadow framework on leverage points. So please.
Thank you, Lone. Yes, so here on the screen, you now see the adaptation of the building block framework for the spatial planning. It is obviously too complex to present in a very short time. It's on one of the posters on the wall, and it comprises different elements that you have seen, and we're happy to discuss any of that with you, maybe in the breaks. Here now, I'd like to concentrate on only one element, but before that, to frame a bit these ambitions. So for those of you who were here yesterday, we were looking at the IPBES Transformative Change framework. And these ambitions are sort of our try to, in principle and in abstract, capture what is needed in terms of drivers. So the first ambition, addressing the more or less the direct drivers, working immediately on protecting biodiversity. The second ambition reflects to a large degree the indirect drivers in terms of spatial planning's contribution to a more balanced and responsible consumption and a production without external social and environmental costs. And the third ambition, reflecting part of the underlying causes, so the root causes. The original framework, as Maria has presented, also builds strongly on what Harriet Bulkley yesterday presented in terms of the Eclipse process on transformative change that was developed to enable or enhance the Kunming negotiation. What I'd like to focus on here is I hope most of you are familiar with the Meadows framework on leverage points for system change that Abson has then also grouped to make it a bit more easy to grasp and to see how our recommendations influence system change. So here we have from the very shallow influencing parameters of a system all the way to paradigm goal change, mindset, and paradigm change. So first block of recommendations that Lone has just outlined and explained. In our estimation, the first one is clearly a change of goal. And by making this explicit and by integrating net gain as an explicit, there's net gain of biodiversity as an explicit goal, there's a chance to change the goal of the system. Integrating system thinking, hopefully can leverage changing the rules of the system, strengthening regulatory framework and adjusting frameworks, so amplifying the options and tools, at the very least should contribute to parameter change as outlined in the lowest point, but ideally also to changing the rules of the system. Establishing multi-level monitoring systems and thereby also uncovering and making explicit some of the feedback loops and hopefully contributes also or also offers the information, the possibility to alter the information flows. Second block. Here, our hope is that with empowering and building capacity in spatial planning, not only the institutional part, but across the different agents, that will help or influence information flow, feedback loops, and parameters. Similarly, oops, there we go. Securing early integration of biodiversity concerns explicitly, again, reinforces the change of the goal. Ensuring successful planning and policy cohesion across levels has the potential to influence from information flow to changing rules, and hopefully the self-organizing structure over time will adapt and integrate this more proactively. Addressing cumulative impacts influences feedback loops and if successfully carried out successfully, and strengthening proactive application and enforcement, again, endorses and the change of goal. Now for the final set, integrating challenges and opportunities into vision building, so very early on in the planning process, has an influence on feedbacks and thereby hopefully also the rules of the system. Broadening baseline studies has impact on buffer stocks, hopefully positive feedback loops, improving the development and use of scenarios. Again, very least parameters, but works on playing with different options of the system and how these interactions could be changed or could be best enhanced, and embedding action-oriented monitoring into planning practices provides the data to make this explicit and thereby also reinforce the positive feedback loops, and by creating more awareness of negative, hopefully reducing these. So if we look at this all together, I think there's two initial conclusions that one could draw from this, that the combination of really evolving the mindset to achieving net gain within and beyond the spatial planning system, securing early integration and strengthening proactive application and enforcement of the mitigation hierarchy in the enhanced version that Lone presented, has the probably, or creates good conditions, I would say, to be able to influence significantly the goal of the planning system. So whether or not the planning system is able to leverage change across different sectors and beyond its own system remains to be analyzed, but following this through, in our estimation, at least we think that can transform the planning system for much more biodiversity positive impact. The second sort of observation is that most of these recommendations have the potential to change how the system is working by making things explicit, by reinforce and thereby reinforcing adaptation of the system. Yeah, and with this, I think we look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah, maybe that we're talking so much, maybe we take some questions at the more overarching level. It was going to be after.
Sorry. Hi, please bear with me for another 15 minutes. I'll try to be brief. Thank you. My name is Lee. I'm a postdoc researcher at the University of Trento, and I've worked in BioValue with my colleagues Enzo and Professor Davide Geneletti, who's the work package leader. So my colleagues have presented overarching recommendations, as you've seen, for the 3 levels of recommendations we have looked at in BioValue. So here, what I want to focus on is we've also analyzed the actual implementation and combination of different instruments for planning practice, so in the planning practice. And this is what I want to focus on. And we've produced a set of recommendations for local authorities and planners mostly on how they can implement and combine the different instruments for a more transformative practice for biodiversity. So Maria already presented what it is that I mean when I say spatial planning instruments for biodiversity. So we basically created a catalog of instruments that are categorized according to their functions, which means their role in shaping and operationalizing policies for biodiversity, influencing behavioral shifts, and actually leading to effective outcomes for biodiversity. Now, these functions, they can go from less regulatory and less legally binding information and plan and project design to regulation and enforcement and control, which are much more legally binding. And these functions, they help us understand and categorize the different instruments that can be used by planners and local authorities for biodiversity. So just to give you as Maria mentioned, we have a long list of instruments that we have analyzed, just to mention a few per category or per function here. Information-based instruments, they are instruments that support the creation of knowledge for action for nature and for intervening in natural areas. And this can be, for example, guidelines or best practice manuals for natural areas, either for private landowners or for public managers as well. This can also be, so we have plan and project design instruments that can be, for example, anything that leads to actual interventions in the territory for nature in natural areas. And for example, I'm thinking the implementation of nature-based solutions in cities. Incentives are pretty self-explanatory, so they are instruments that help incentivize private landowners and managers to help enhance natural areas through their activities. We have agreements, which are instruments that help parties reach, again, agreements for supporting management practices in natural areas that are biodiversity enhancing. And then we have more legally binding instruments like regulations, and we can think about land use zoning, for example, or conservation zoning through protected areas, and even more legally binding that require public authorities to hold control of the territory, either through land acquisition or even more extreme measures like expropriation, for example. So we've analyzed various instruments across all of these functions, and we've come up with a very long list set of recommendations for actual planning practice, so for authorities to implement these instruments. And of course, for let's say, for the sake of time today, I will just unpack a few of these recommendations to illustrate what it is that came out of our work here in BioValue. So let's start with the function of information, and I'm just showing here one example of the instrument we've analyzed: the creation of guidelines, best practices, manuals, and recommendations for managing natural areas, either for private landowners or for public managers. Think a park in a city, for example, for this type of recommendations. So what we've seen in our research is that when planners use generalized or standardized information to actually draft these guidelines and recommendations, they might not only be unintentionally harming local biodiversity, but they also may miss very good opportunities. They overlook opportunities for using local practices or traditional practices that actually have local context-specific value and social cultural value as well as environmental value. So one of our recommendations in this sense is that local planners need to adapt the guidelines and recommendations when they are drafting these documents to their planning process or to their planning context. And they can do so by not only engaging with actors early on from the very beginning when they're drafting these recommendations, but also combining it with information that has been produced throughout the planning process using context-specific information, biodiversity assessments, ecosystem service assessments, ecosystem condition assessments that actually help understand the local ecological conditions before they are producing these guidelines and recommendations for managing natural areas. And we also recommend that they ensure adequate technical support for whatever land managers and owners are willing to adopt this guideline and recommendations, especially if there's going to be new technologies or new practices being suggested. So there needs to be adequate technical support for adequate uptake of these recommendations. And just to illustrate what we mean by instrument combination also, we see, sorry, maybe, let me put this so you can really see, but anyway. So just to illustrate what we mean by instrument combination, so you can also use incentive instruments to help increase the uptake of these recommendations. So we're talking about non-mandatory, non-legally binding suggestions of how private landowners should manage their properties. So there needs to be an extra incentive for them to actually perhaps follow through with these recommendations. And so we recommend, for example, that when local authorities and planners are designing these guidelines and recommendations, that they actually foresee early on how can we provide positive incentives to reward private owners that are willing to comply with this, or to not to comply, but to adopt these recommendations as they're not legally binding. So think, for example, tax reliefs. And this is the sort of instrument combination that we suggest in our recommendations. So let me see how we are on time. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let me just unpack a few extra ones here. So for a different function, plan and project design, as I said, one of the instruments we've analyzed in this function is design-based projects. So again, think the creation of nature-based solutions in cities, for example. One of the things we've noticed in our analysis is that a key challenge for local authorities to actually implement such projects is lack of resources, both financial and in terms of personnel, to actually foresee the design, the implementation, and monitoring of these nature-based solutions. And we've also seen lack of strategic coordination, meaning that they struggle with actually implementing these projects in ways that align with strategic policies outside of the city, for example, at a larger scale, or that conflict with other sectoral policies, think transportation, for example. And so in providing recommendations for local authorities to implement these design-based projects, we thought that they need to allocate dedicated personnel and budgets for the long-term success of these design-based projects. Of course, it's something that is easy said, but local authorities need to balance their budgets for other priorities as well. But then we also provide recommendations of how they can overcome this by early on in the design phase of nature-based solutions, thinking about private corporations that can help support the implementation of these instruments. Think about sponsorships, for example. So nature-based solutions that are sponsored by corporate actors that are willing to take part in this in this kind of project. So they need to be identified early on to be engaged in the design of these type of instruments. And then in terms of combining instruments here, we also see we have a recommendation for improving the regulatory targets that allow local authorities to have more or less funding for municipal development. So for example, central governments in some member states, when they're deciding how much money to allocate to different local authorities, they do have a regulation and they have to follow through specific requirements. And although they do have sometimes some requirements related to nature and the share of nature that is present in cities, perhaps we can improve this regulatory documents to actually include other thresholds for municipalities that are either using more of this design-based projects and creating more nature-based solutions in cities, but also that are targeting relevant or important habitats or ecosystems so they can access more funding and again, overcome the gap of having no dedicated budget and personnel to oversee the implementation of these projects. And so, let me see, in terms of incentives, we have many different instruments we could be talking about. I brought here today some recommendations regarding density bonuses. So maybe for those of you not familiar, density bonuses are instruments that allow private infrastructure developers to increase their developing density, so higher floor space or creating more units in exchange for creating additional green spaces or providing affordable housing. So they are bonuses for constructors. And what we've seen in our analysis is that sometimes when misused, this instrument can actually lead to a net loss of biodiversity if other impacts of the project are not properly considered. And also, if the restrictions for accessing or the criteria for accessing these bonuses are too restrictive, then they're underused. So no private developers is going to want to jump and use this incentive. So it's it's an underused incentive, so to say. And so we recommend, for addressing the first gap that we've seen, we recommend that when local authorities and planners are designing this instrument, that they link the bonuses not only to a simple increase in area. So it's not just about creating green spaces, it's about creating green spaces with quality and perhaps even touching on connectivity, habitat connectivity. So we need to increase the requirements for accessing density bonuses. But at the same time, as I said, if we make this too restrictive, then no one is going to want to follow through. So we can also combine this with other instruments as incentives, for example, and we can think about green credits and loans. So they can local authorities can partner with financial institutions to create adequate programs for projects that are actually qualifying for density bonuses, so they can have access to green credits and loans, and then they can actually uptake density bonuses and use this instrument to create better green spaces in cities. And so, for the sake of time, maybe because we still need to have discussions, I would like to leave with, let's say, 3 key insights from this part of the work in BioValue. The first one is that when we've analyzed the implementation and combination of instruments for biodiversity, what we've seen is that most spatial planning instruments, they can contribute to an increase in the area of habitats directly, but sometimes they fail to actually improve habitat quality or connectivity. So they're just about creating new spaces or unsealing surfaces, for example, without taking into consideration the quality and the connectivity of these natural areas. So of course, some of our recommendations in this regard are for planning practices to improve in exactly this aspect. And another thing that we've seen when we've analyzed the implementation and combination of instruments for biodiversity is that when applied isolatedly, they have potential for conflicts over social costs. So we have green gentrification as a problem that arises, unrewarded actors in the process, and so on. And of course, then again, as I try to illustrate, some of our recommendations are for addressing this aspect in particular. And finally, although I've been talking a lot about recommendations for local authorities and planners, which is what I wanted to focus on, you may also see that we have some of our recommendations, they require action at higher governance levels. When I talked about increasing the regulation for how much budget is actually allocated for local municipalities, this is outside the jurisdiction of local municipalities. So this is decided at a higher governance level. So some of our recommendations are also directed at higher governance levels for policy coherence and to make sure that planning practice can be more transformative for biodiversity. And I think I will stop, give some time to breathe, and we can all be free for coffee break. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi and Lone and Leah, for these presentations. We still have about 10 minutes, 12 minutes actually, for discussion. So who would like to, there's people on,
Yes,
how do you
have a
intend?
question
Okay,
from Mauricio Silgardi.
okay, so right. So maybe we can start with the online question. Mauricio, the question is he going to show there? The question is, how do you intend to evaluate biodiversity? With what methods and indices? Well, I don't know if anyone wants to answer that, but I would say that we're not evaluating biodiversity. We are evaluating the spatial planning, policy making, planning, and practices that will create conditions to improve biodiversity. But I don't know if anyone, and measuring biodiversity would be by another project or other conditions, other processes connected to, I don't know, Natura 2000, whatever.
Maybe I interpret Maurice's question in the sense of how do we increase the biodiversity value? So, yeah, so in what way do we measure the value that, as we said, we wanted to increase it. And I think some of the case study of the arenas will demonstrate this, but for example, by ecosystem service assessment, by the integration of stakeholders in the process, what aspects of biodiversity are they interested in? So I think that will come out in the arenas.
Yeah, that could be if the interpretation is correct, Mauricio, but maybe you can come back through the chat to if you're not clarified. Thank you, Heidi. Okay, Francisco.
Thank you for the presentation.
Maybe do you want to use the microphone just because it shows people online?
So thank you for the presentations. When I see the list of these 14 or elements that you described, and then you place them in the app, Meadows apps and so on, my question that comes immediately to the forefront is, how are you handling trade-offs? Because all of the 14 things require additional stuff, like broaden your perspective or fix the regulatory framework, include system thinking, which is of course more complicated than more simpler thinking, ensure that there is a capacity, incorporate biodiversity, and all of that makes sense, except that I wonder about the trade-offs. In the last presentation, which I think it was really interesting because it goes into the details, you are talking about zoning, acquisition, tax reliefs. All of those are things that have multiple uses. And my question is, how are you going to assess the value of those multiple uses?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a rather practical question. I think one challenge for all of our projects is how we actually engage with the practical stakeholders and how we convince them to collaborate with a scientific project. So I wonder if you partnered up with the planning authorities and how you convinced them to collaborate with you. And well, many of the instruments you mentioned also affect other actors, right? Like usually there's like the agricultural payments, or there's the, I don't know, it's different governmental area actors, sometimes on different political levels. Yeah, how have you worked with that?
Yes, it is true first. Before I pass on for the first question, I'll ask Heidi Loan to answer, but I'll come to your second, because they will be talking after coffee, the local authorities. They are part of the project and they will be speaking. So if you come back after coffee, then you can listen. Thank you. So Heidi?
Maybe I can start addressing. Yes, of course, in a broader sense, there are plenty of trade-offs, but our experience is that a lot of the biodiversity issues sort of fall besides the decision, or aren't addressed properly, not so much because there's so many trade-offs, but because they're so implicit and they're not addressed early on in an explicit way. And several of the elements that we've developed, and Lone can go on detailing much better, are rather simple ways of trying to delineate or identifying these questions early on. So with the biological principles, to see what would really matter for biodiversity. Looking at, once stakeholders have defined what they care about, then looking at how this can be put into action by acquiring the finance and the funding. In theory, I mean, ever since We did TEEP in 2010. There we pulled together experiences that already existed back then. And it was quite evident that there's plenty of case studies and plenty of single experiences in the spatial planning area, but that it's not systematically integrated. And the cost benefit usually is quite in favor, but it doesn't come to the surface. And it's this anchoring it systematically in the process that we think will make the difference.
Thank you for the question. It's a tricky one, absolutely. And I think you really press an important button, because if we have like a tunnel vision or tunnel sight on just part of the system, then we can get in trouble, or at best we can just do no harm to biodiversity. So I can just tell you like 2 approaches that we have used in the in addition to what Heidi shares here. One is really to try to grasp the system thinking. That's not easy. And even though we are focusing on biodiversity in the project with the point of departure in spatial planning, there are still many other concerns: climate change, land take, health, and so on. So what we have tried to do is to build a tool for how to think about the synergies and the trade-offs and really visualize it. And that, I think, is one of, at least from the work package that I have represented here, has been a key tool in the process. I showed you a little causal loop diagram. Don't show it to anyone, but use it in the process. Like, use that way of thinking, really unfold, map how there are different linkages, both related to biodiversity per se, but also how it relates to other societal objectives that we have. So really to avoid having this tunnel vision, that is one thing. The other one that Leah mentioned was the 3 concerns about the habitat quality, the connectivity, and the size. All 3 needs to be in place. What we have seen in several planning settings is that we green things, we green urban areas, but we're not. That is also important, maybe for recreation, for air quality, climate adaptation, and so on. But for biodiversity, it might do nothing. So really also have that system thinking for knowing that size matters of the area if you really want to support biodiversity, but you also need the quality of the habitat. And you need to connect and have the different patches. So I think as we have written here, like using biology in spatial planning as a compass, that is also one of the ways to secure or look into the trade-offs and the synergies. So I could dive more into it, but there was 2 approaches that we have used.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on this?
Just a quick follow-up, also to link what Lauren just said with Maurizio's question on how we assess or measure biodiversity. And in one of the arena, we try to capture exactly these 3 dimensions. So habitat size, habitat quality or conditions, and habitat connectivity. And those dimensions use the foundations to then design specific context-specific instruments, like a zoning scheme or a nature-based solutions or a performance-based planning that will fit the context based on those key parameters about biodiversity.
Yes, Arild Angelsen is my name, from the Norwegian University of Life Science. I'm an economist, and generally we regard, when you look at why do we have environmental problems, it's because there are some public goods. So biodiversity are public good with benefits at global and national level, some at the local level, but far and few. So the main problem here to me is that municipalities, which are often assigned with spatial planning, do not have the incentives to do that. And at the end of the day, there are politicians sitting, and I see that in my municipality, between supporting kindergartens or homes for the elderly people or schools or whatever good causes, and some protection of that. And cute birds don't pay for kindergartens, basically. So why, and I missed kind of this aspect, so that at the end of the day, there are not sufficient incentives for doing that. So one measure that has been suggested is this ecological fiscal transfer, so that from the federal governments, that it's part based on maybe some biodiversity indicators to give real incentives to do that. Otherwise, I think that just having nice processes and the end, when it ends up in the municipality board, it may lose. So how do you have good examples of that, or why didn't you discuss it more?
We will after coffee again, because we have the three arenas will be showing what they've done. And even though it's far from perfect, we already have examples, and both Mafra and Trento, and well, the MacPom, which is not here, they will show their challenges like that. And also what have been there. And there's been, you know, I've been looking into the movie. It's not there now, but the movie that is passing, there's some messages from the various arenas, both from Matteo and from Sofia. I've seen a few messages that some way address your issue.
That's what the recommendation 3 and 4 refer to. So providing the incentives from the higher level that can be fiscal to changing the rules for fiscal transfer, that can be adapting the definition of what municipalities can do by tax reliefs or by any other local instruments. So yes, that's essential. And I'd also wanted to point to another one of the posters where we sort of show how economic and financial tools can be integrated into the logic of the planning cycle to identify for each situation how to finance. And then third aspect, that's why we think the enhancement is so important, because if you think only of either or, then of course you can't build the kindergarten, but you can build a kindergarten in such a way that it's not maximum harmful to biodiversity, but actually also keeps some parts. And if connected well, actually helps to enhance. So there are much more synergies out there than we can see if we look only very narrow.
You just you skip. Yeah. Okay.
I would like only to give a short comment to the gentleman who is about to leave. Yeah, you left. You were leaving. You were leaving. No, just a small input, because I mean that's a really important question about the trade-offs and the synergies, and that is what we are trying to play out in the game, because it's so context specific. The trade-offs that we and the synergies that are being identified depend on the context, on the system we are operating in, and in the arrangements that are in each place. So in the game, we are with the people. So in a collaborative space, it's about creating a collaborative space for identifying those trade-offs specifically and deal with them. What is going to be prioritized or not in the community, which is being well addressed. So sorry for putting you on the spot.
Sorry, I thought you wanted to say something else, that's why I didn't. Anyway, I know there was some other questions, but if we should break for coffee now and come back at 11, right? Help me, 11, okay? And then we will have the arenas presentation, and then we have more time for discussion, okay? Thank you, and I'll see you later.
Hello?
Okay, can we sit to follow up with the session, please? Yep. So thank you so much to this second round of presentations of BioValue. And now we are focusing on our practical side, our practical work. And the arenas will share their insights, the processes, and also, I hope, some challenges and possibilities for future work. And just to context, my name is Margarida. I'm from IST. I followed the process of the arenas. I'm very proud of it, so thank you. And we will start, we will have the 3 arenas. So first we will have MacPom, sorry for the short name. I also cannot say the longest name. So we first will have MacPom, it's online. Jenny will do the presentation. We will follow with Mafra, municipality, and we will end with Trento. And then we have a Q&A moment. And please, let's start. So maybe can we start with MacPom? So Jenny, are you there?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Super.
Let me just. I can. Oh. Okay. Yeah, Jenny, whenever you need for me to change the slides, please say something, okay?
Okay, I will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry I cannot be there in person, but I'm very happy to be here, at least digitally. So, yeah, we are diving into Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is a northeast province of Germany, a federal state, where we have a lot of drained peatlands, and we are looking at the transformative power that can evoke. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern has a few years ago had elections for the federal state government, and in the coalition statement, the new government then formulated that they wanted to aim for climate neutrality in 2040, which is not very far ahead. And for that, they wanted to give the federal state a climate protection law. So that law is still in process. I can already spoil with that information. It's still not there. It's still hanging in the discussion between the different ministries, the different sectors. So you can see that this is quite difficult. So just to name the first challenge. But for getting to this climate neutrality, the climate protection is needed, and the peatland soils of the area are playing a large role there. The revetting of the soils is supposed to help securing the greenhouse gases that are within the soil, so they are not emitted. And with that, other sectors can be then released of their burden of having to be climate neutral because they can still emit while the other emissions are reduced. So what does that mean in the context of transformative change? Well, this large-scale revetting that is supposed to happen, which is like about 12% of the land area of the federal state, is of course a big change in land use, but also in mindset and in livelihood opportunities for the people in the area, and also, of course, then on the different political levels. Because in the current situation, this is only happening on a very small scale. So this large scale, this bringing it up to this large scale, that is the transformative change that needs to happen. Next slide, please. What was now the expectation for this arena? Well, we wanted to observe and facilitate the mainstreaming of biodiversity in this revetting process and in this policy development and design, because the climate protection is the first objective, and there biodiversity can easily fall behind or can be forgotten about or can be pushed to the side. And we wanted to look at how this can be still included or integrated. What we are looking at here is a multi-level process, and this is an important aspect of this planning process because it's not a very confined area where, for example, a spatial plan is newly set up, but it's a multi-level process. So the law needs to be formulated on the federal state level. And then, of course, it goes all the way down to the local level where the re-wetting happens at the end. So through the implementation of the law, and that is already clear now in the pre-formulation phase or in the formulation phase, that it includes a lot of re-wetting and a lot of areas that are affected. And most areas, that is important to say, most areas that are within nature protection areas, they are already re-wetted, they are already dealt with over the course of the last centuries through nature protection programs. But now the hard part comes to go to the areas that are still in agricultural use. So there's farmers farming on these areas that depend on it with their livelihoods. And these areas are now supposed to be re-wetted on a large scale. And this is, of course, affecting all kind of different levels, all kind of different sectors as well, because then the question is what happens with the produce they have as crops on these areas. There's no value chain established yet. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, let's say, for change there. The challenge in our arena was that we do not have a direct mandate to implement instruments as we are not part of the municipality or of the government. Ministries, planning agencies, and so on. So we were coming from the outside, working together with people, trying to establish areas where we could offer input, offer the help of facilitation. And as I said before, with this multi-level planning process, of course, we had to work together with different actors from different levels. And as you can imagine, they're all very busy, so it was not always very easy to engage or to have opportunities for direct impact. But we managed, nevertheless, to have some good points, and I want to introduce them to you now. Next slide, please. So what are the main challenges for the large-scale re-wetting and what is needed for this upscaling of this transformative change that is happening only in small places so far? Well, first of all, we have a private land ownership of most of the areas that need to be re-wetted. So only very small areas are in the hand of the federal state or of the municipalities. Most is privately owned. And within this privately owned land, there's also small scale different ownership structures. So if you want to deal with one area that you want to re-wet, you have several people you need to talk to, because farmers are also not owning all the land they farm, but a lot of the land is owned by different people, and the farmers rent the land, so or lease the land. So yeah, you have to deal not only with the land users, but also with the landowners, so two different groups. And then, of course, we have the big issue that the income is decreased by the re-wetting, because the products that you can sell then as a farmer afterwards are worth less on the market at the moment than what you can do on drained peatlands with fodder production, animal grazing, or grain production. And livelihoods depend directly on this land. As well, the land value is decreased by the re-wetting. So if you want to sell it, for example, it's worth less. And this is linked, of course, to some, how do you call it, loans that farmers have taken out from the bank to finance, for example, stables and stuff. So they have as a security given the land. And if the land value decreases, they lose the security for their land, for their loan. So yes, there's this issue. And then, of course, the third big challenge, as I said before, is that climate protection was the main, or is the main objective. and the biodiversity conservation is kind of now on a backdrop on that discussion in this designing of instruments, in the decisions that are taken. And there, yeah, we wanted to also go in and raise that issue and tackle it. Next slide, please. So what did we do? And of course, this is, as Maria said before, only a small outtake of what we have found, because we cannot present everything here, but this is the main instruments that we found to be relevant and that we looked at in consequence. And you see on the left side the instruments, and on the right top the challenges. And I will go through the different instruments and then address how they affect or how they deal with the different challenges. So first of all, we have the regional planning, and in there we looked specifically at the designated areas, because the spatial plans are updated regularly in a kind of 10 years time frame. And one of the main instruments within the regional planning is to designate areas for specific uses. So you kind of privilege certain uses over others. So when then the decision is taken which uses can be done in a certain area or which permissions are given, then these are overruling other options. Then we look at the land consolidation programs, which is like Lina called it earlier, land parcel ownership rearrangement. So you I will explain when I come to that slide. Maybe I go through the instruments straight away on their slides. Next slide, please. So we have here the regional planning, as I said before, with the designated areas. And here you can see that the challenges are differently valued by us for these challenges. So land ownership issues are addressed. Through that, the land use change may negatively affect the income options. And also because the land ownership cannot be directly affected. So we cannot, it was very clearly stated by the government that there will be no land appropriation. Do you call it appropriation? Like when you take land away from people, that is not going to happen. So it's all going to happen on a voluntary basis. But you can, of course, when you have in a larger area a designation for certain users, you have people also agreeing more easily because there is a long-term planning and there is a societal push for this land use. So if you designate certain areas for climate protection or peatland protection, then the hope at least is that this creates an environment where people are also more willing to go with this land users. So this also reduces the burden on the planning administration. You also then free up capacities for other processes, like for example, for processes of, sorry, I'm missing the word, like involving people in the decision-making processes, like to explain to them why you did this decision. So one of the planners we talked to, he was like constantly in meetings with people that are living in the area, with the public, explaining the decisions they did on wind energy that is happening at the moment, because wind energy is a big topic in Germany at the moment. So there's areas privileged for that. And then you have to, of course, include public consultation in the planning process. And then you have to go to the communities and you have to discuss your decisions with them. So you need a lot of capacity for that, to make your decisions clear and to take a consideration, to take opinions into consideration when revising the plan then again. What is an option here for the landowners is to also then have a perspective, because the perspective is clearly set in that areas for paludiculture. Paludiculture is the farming on revetted peatland soils. So you farm certain grasses and other plants like Typhia for certain uses, for example, energy use or materials. You can do that in two different ways. You can do this more intensively, where you have conventional farming just in a different way, just on wet soils, but it can also be positive for biodiversity, where you can create habitats. And this is why we have here as well the loss of income and the mainstreaming biodiversity challenges, both in a depends framing, because it depends on how it is done then in the end. If it creates income, so that means are value chains developed, are the products, can they get enough on the market to cover the costs? Is there, for example, funding opportunities for machineries and so on? But also then biodiversity is of course then linked to the farming practices, and also on the planning aspect, the spatial planning aspect, because you can of course also plan in certain areas that are extensified, and then you get more benefits on the biodiversity aspect. Next slide, please. I believe I do have 5 minutes left. Is that correct? So land consolidation programs is one way or one instrument we looked at especially, and that is that you try to consolidate bigger parcels of land, because if you re-wet, you can of course imagine that if you re-wet one parcel of land, the parcels around it are also affected. You cannot do this very small scale. It's a larger scale process. And there's some landowners or land users that are unwilling to do this because they have different lines of production, and then they can swap land to the area which is not revetted. And this is a very well-established instrument in Germany. It's used since the 50s, and we have specific agencies for this. Even so, the stuff is short and the process takes long. This is seen as an opportunity to also include biodiversity into this process, to say where is actually options to set aside or to extensify areas for biodiversity. There is an option that this is positive for biodiversity. Next slide, please. The strategic environmental assessment we looked at, and here there is a big opportunity for mainstreaming biodiversity, since there is what Lone presented before, the option to include biodiversity already early in the process. And SEA would here be seen as a way to look at the climate protection law and its implementation already from the beginning, to see how not only climate protection can be the focus, but also biodiversity can be integrated. Next slide, please. We also looked at financial and economic incentives, and here especially the paludiculture and the value chains are in focus. And we are talking both about public sector and governmental funding. It helps with the investment cost for landowners to change their agriculture practices. That also leads to more acceptance. And the programs still need to be set up in a way to include biodiversity. That is not yet happening. There's also carbon emission certificates, but here's the danger is that global market mechanisms may hinder the large-scale implementation in this German federal state. But yeah, there are also ways to address that. Next slide, please. I'm looking at recommendations here. So we took out 3 recommendations that are especially relevant for our arena. So evolve planning mindset to achieve net gain of biodiversity and empower and build capacity. I combined here 2 recommendations because I think they're very much linked in in a way that to be able to change the mindset and to have the capacity to change the mindset, there needs to be the capacity in the agencies, in the actual people on the ground. And planners there are very much overburdened at the moment, but they are looking at employing more staff. And then also this mindset needs to be backed up by higher levels, by political levels, because otherwise people are unwilling on the local level, on the regional level to take the decisions because they can then be challenged. And if there's no backup from the political level at a higher level, this is hindered. Next slide, please. Then we took the recommendation secure early integration of biodiversity concerns. I already said that this is, for example, the SEA, or also to adjust existing instruments like the land allocation program. Next slide, please. And then also here the recommendation to adjust frameworks for fiscal and economic tools to broaden the local government option for enhancing biodiversity. And here, as I said before, the programs need to be considering biodiversity in the future. Also, there need to be programs developed that are specific to this innovative land use change with the paludiculture to buffer the risk taking that land users are facing. And then again to link the paludiculture production to biodiversity enhancement. Next slide, please. So the overall conclusions from our arena are that the transformative change requires these multi-scale efforts. So from the national to the federal state levels, also regional and local levels, they need to agree to similar visions and objectives, and that needs to then lead to updated regulations and practices. We have the challenge that there's some fast political changes, for example, the push for more wind energy that is then clashing with the long-term planning that is like on a large scale done, and to weigh all the options, like one of the planners said, and that is one of my favorite quotes from the whole research in these 3 years. If everybody is unhappy, I've done my job well. So spatial planning often means to combine all the interests and all the perspectives, but means in the end to find compromises that of course make not everybody super happy, but because not everybody gets their whole package, but everybody gets a fair share, and everybody knows that all the options have been weighed and all the interests have been taken into concern. And I think this is something which we need to also communicate better, that these outcomes are basically a very democratic process and can help us in the political agenda as well. Of course, overarching questions like, for example, the land value needs to be taken into account and needs to be discussed more as well on a societal level, because we have in Germany as well as in other European countries a drift towards the right wing, and we have in this federal state also elections coming up. So we need to make sure that we take all of the population with in these changes and explain very well how everybody can benefit. And I want to come back, I don't think the gentleman is still there, but the Norwegian colleague who said cute birds don't really pay for the kindergarten. And I, as an ecologist, would argue, yes, they do. Of course, not directly, because they don't give you the coin. But if we do not have the functioning ecosystems, we do not have the production options, we do not have the value chains, blah, blah, blah. So we don't have the money for the kindergarten in the end as well. And I think spatial planning and with that also the explanations behind it can help to make that also visible and create a more scientifically based decision for society. Okay, thank you very much. That was my input from Mecklenburg-Vorpommern.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you for sharing your insights on the process that you walked through these 3 years. Now, if Mafra municipality could come, please, to share your insights.
Good morning, everyone. We are going to share the presentation. We're trying to keep focus on the time also. My name is Sofia. I'm responsible for the Department of Spatial Planning in the municipality of Mafra. I'm also an urban planner and landscape architecture, and Cesar is with me. He started to work with us in the beginning of the project. He's a geographer, and he also present Mafra in terms of where it plays, and I will start there.
Thank you, Sophia. I will start my presentation to try to explain what is MAFRA in 5 minutes, but it's going to be difficult, and then to try to explain how MAFRA is in terms of biodiversity in these last years, not transformative change, but what we have been doing different to achieve this. And then I will talk a little bit about our process in BioValue. Okay. So the best part, MAFRA is located in the western of Portugal, near to Lisbon. So this information is important because since we are a municipality close to Lisbon, we have this constantly pressure about the growing of population, and with the increase of tourists and all the other challenges. In 2021, we are approximately 85,000 inhabitants. We are the second municipality at the national level with the most growing of people between 2011 and 2021. So this brings a lot of challenges too. We are known for that picture is an iconic picture of MAFRA, for MAFRA National Palace, that is Patrimony of UNESCO, World Surfing Reserve in Ericeira, the coastline and the rural landscapes. And here is the important aspect that we want to highlight, that is the strategic importance. MAFRA is known for this interface between rural landscapes and the urban lands, okay? And this is important to highlight. More directly close to biodiversity, we have the National Park of MAFRA that is more than 800 hectares of protected forest and biodiversity. We have rich ecosystem with Mediterranean flora and native fauna. The deer is just in Tapada, but the boar and the birds is for all the municipality. Our coastline that I will show in a map afterwards, this slide. The dunes, the cliffs, and the marine ecosystems. In BioValue, we focus a lot in the part of the land, but we have also the part of the marine ecosystems. Since we have a big coastline, we have a lot of biodiversity in there too. And we have the Natura 2000 site that is a protected area for us and bring a lot of constraints that was important. And one more protected area where we include the Tapada. Here is a very simple map of our municipality. As you can see, the interfaces between urban lands and the natural values. You can see the Natura 2000, the World Surfing Reserve, the National Park that is Tapada in the center. So it's a very important area for us. Our local initiatives, what is being the process of biodiversity in MAFRA. We have a strong environmental education programs in schools, in other associations and other projects. We have habitat restoration and reforestation projects. Recently we buy like a part of land to do restoration. We have a lot of programs of reforestation in Tapada and in other areas. Partnerships with the universities and NGOs, that is with BioValue is an example, but it's there since the last years. And then the European Union fund initiatives that are very important to MAFRA and bring a lot of money. That was LIFE program, CDGs, that is a strong part in MAFRA that MAFRA is invest a lot, and of course our BioValue. To talk about a little bit of our process in MAFRA inside BioValue. We start in that side to have our process of planning system. So we have the strategic vision, the territory model, the plan proposal, and then the validation was the 4 big themes of our process. And the BioValue came when we are in the second revision of the master plan. So the BioValue, we are mainly in the strategic vision. So our process was directed by that aspect. So we have workshops with local stakeholders, workshops and technical roundtables with the technicians of the municipality, and bring all together was a very difficult task. and we have partnership with master and doctoral students within the scope of BioValue with our academic partners. So this was our first workshop that we have in BioValue. And the most important thing to take off this package is that the people that are in here, they return in the second and the third workshop. So this is very important and was a big victory for us. Now I will pass to Sofia. Thank you.
So I will like to outline some of these instruments that our colleagues will talk before, the WP1, 2, and 3. And some of them are already work in the municipality, but this is not an ending project. This is an opening project and a working process, I would like to say. So we have the protect and conservation areas as an example. Cesar already talked, was about the Tapada Nacional. It's a project and project for conservation and also a patrimonial project associated to the palace. We also have this land use and zoning as the master plan of Mafra. It's a very important because when we start the project of BioValue, we saw as an example of a scale of the municipality. For that is a very different task in the arenas. We also have this design-based instrument that are already working in Mafra for biodiversity. For example, these projects that we show, Perla, it's on the water lines, the El Shizakil, it's about a specific species, and so on. We also, the municipality bought some land acquisition in the coastline for ecological restoration. That is a project that is going to happen in the ending of this year, that are going to be built. And also contractualization and stewardships with this program of El Shizakwa management agreements with the landowners to protect the Bonelli eagle. For WP1, one of the different mindsetting that we change also in these 3 years of this project, but also the opportunities that we have before to work in the special planning programs and special planning instruments, was the CIA, the Strategic Environment Assessment. It's not just a checklist of the projects, it must be a front project. It must be aligned with the programs, with the plans, and must contribute what we want to decide, even the agenda of politicians. Another example of this instrument was the information consultation engagement, the workshops with the local stakeholders. It's an opportunity, very strong opportunity to bring them to our decisions in the municipality. The baseline assessments that we start to work in the project, and was very important for us when we start working the BioValue, was the mapping of an ecosystem service, not just for the planning system, but also to know what we are going, the scenarios that we want to do in Mafra. In related to that, we also have the monitoring and evaluation, the report and state of spatial planning that give rise to the spatial planning monitoring system, and can contribute to some open data that we are developing in the municipality. The WP3, we are trying, this is more difficult for us in working, trying to implement a payment of ecosystem service. This is one of other projects that would like to develop, is to define a percentage of municipal property tax to be directed towards to biodiversity. Also, reducing of taxes and licensing fees for projects that promote biodiversity enhancement, specific in these constructing projects, for example. Another, it's more like a national level. It's the general tax law and state budget, whereby municipalities that promote the preservation and enhancement of biodiversity, that can be all the territory of the municipality. not just for urban areas, but all for rural areas. And another one that I would like to highlight is the ecological fiscal transfers. This is a specific fund, municipal fund for environment and urban sustainable, that can be applied probably more to the urban areas. This was another workshop that we are trying to play with some of the stakeholders that Cesar was showing before. We are trying to test the cards, the game, with the different instruments, with the different colors of the WP 1, 2, and 3. For the transformative change, the value of biodiversity for local identity. So we must change in thinking that biodiversity, sorry, I cannot read. Can I take this off? No? Drag and drop. I have here. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So changing the thinking of biodiversity, this is one of the things that was said before, should be integrated into the land use and in spatial planning, and create a public participatory, like the workshops that I showed you before, directly to talk about the biodiversity, and also to talk for example, in Mafra, what scenario do you want in Mafra? Everything built or not? Or everything construct? What can we get from these challenges? The other thing that transformative change for us was the mapping of ecosystem service that defined the guidelines and in the beginning of the land development and in the spatial planning development process. The changings also with the municipality building or regulation. Other example I have said before was to associate CIA in the vision of an early stage of the process, and to finish and improve application of monitoring and evaluation, creating of a land use monitoring system with a strong focus on biodiversity. It can give an analytic point of view and can show to also people what can be the view or can be the scenario in Mafra that I said before. No. Sorry, okay. It's nervous also, with like me. The legacy. So this is not an ending, this is an ongoing process. One of the things that we are thinking, it's continuing this relationship with science and researchers, because sometimes in the municipality we are just working for the day after and not thinking for a long term. And sometimes we need to get out of the municipality and think different and see how other people are doing, how municipality of Trento are doing, how Jenny is doing, and what is they've done. Because everyone is thinking something about some problems that I think already we have, all of us have the same problems about the spatial planning or about managing the municipalities. So one idea is to continue this relationship and how the natural restoration law can be integrated in the planning system and in some projects that we have already started. Institution changing to ensure cross-border cooperation between municipality departments. Sometimes we are not working together, but we are thinking the same things and have the same problems to be solved. Model for integrated functioning between public and private owners. Also identification of land value through mapping ecosystem service, and create an initiative laboratories for territorial development with practical results for showing also to the stakeholders and the people that live there and are going to visit us. Also implementing of an effective ecosystem service payment system. This is a very challenging for the next few years. Changes in the policy on fees charged by the municipality to capture the added value of land. Also the process of integration biodiversity in spatial planning as an example to give to other municipalities. Potentially, spatial planning has been aggregator of initiatives and municipal actions in the municipality that proactively position Mafra as a front-runner in thinking and absorbing those commitments in policy making. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you both, Sofia and Cesar, for sharing your process. And now we have Trento. We will leave. Do you, can you support here because it's another system?
Oh yeah, maybe. Okay, perfect. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Matteo. Federica's over there. We represent the Trento municipality. Grazie. And today we'll be speaking about the Fersina River, the third arena. So what is the Fersina? And what is Trento? Trento is a city of roughly 120,000 inhabitants. It's located in the northeastern part of the Alps, of the Italian Alps. And the Fersina, even though a small alpine river, actually showed huge potential for changes, also for the citywide prospects. So locating on some major European corridors, the north-southern and the east-western ones, this is Trento today as a size comparison. This is Rome, Paris, and Berlin. So you can understand that what we're dealing with size-wise, population-wise, resources-wise is quite limited compared to other major European cities. But just before jumping in the river itself, let's look at what recent history taught us in Trento. So until the mid-19th century, this was Trento, a medieval European city, like many others facing a river, which was actually a gentle river, the Adige, connecting north and south Trento to other cities. The Adige, and this is the Fersina. However, under the Austrians, by the mid-19th century, that changed when the idea to better connect the empire, the remote parts of the empire, Trento was in Italy back then, meant that the Austrians provided us with a plan to build the railway. And the red line is the railway. Here we can start seeing how things started changing landscape-wise. So the Adige is still there. The Fersina started to change its watercourse, not anymore going inside the city, but being pushed gradually outside. At the same time, what interventions were the Fersina was facing started to take place. So the embankments, as we can see in that section, became much more real, so much more set in stone. And there were even plans to do a third movement of the Fersina, which luckily never happened. Further north further east in the city, the dam, which initially in the 16th century was out of wood, finally set in stone in what actually it is today. Our partners had the fortune to come and see it, and it's quite astonishing, actually. And this was a postcard of the day. So when the dam was completed, it was actually a major event for citizens. So by the 1850s, we start seeing how drastically Trento changed. So the Adige was rectified, the Fersina was settled in what it is today. And at the in the early years of the 20th century, this was Trento. So not anymore a city facing two rivers, but actually a city without boundaries. So free to expand north and south. the postcard is actually the Adige, not the Fersina, so what it looked like and what it isn't like today. So what is Trento today, and what is the Fersina today? So it actually begins 2,000 meters in the east before reaching Trento. It has this great historical significance. It has these amazing natural features, which we will see. And it actually flows inside the city, providing a lot of ecosystem services, which are limited. Just to better understand, we divided the river in 3 segments. So the canyon, which has these features. So we go from a very kind of degraded, abandoned area, heavily infrastructurized, but with a very beautiful natural features that numbered 40,000 visitors last year, actually. To the urban context, where we have very strict stone embankments and lush spontaneous vegetation, which is periodically removed for safety issues. And then the delta segment, which is the river where we see it is heavily infrastructurized, heavily constricted in concrete embankments. So this is what we actually faced. Just let me move this. Excessive artificiality, loss of biodiversity, water pollution, governance issues, and majorly the lack of awareness of the citizens that never even visited areas that were a couple of kilometers away. And we saw the project BioValue as an opportunity to integrate these features. So create an actual green corridor, improve accessibility for people, raise awareness, and enhance soft mobility along the river. So before we see the results, BioValue helped us in this transformative change. And our initial plan, confronting ourselves with our partners, was to, first of all, establish a new engagement with our stakeholders, co-produce with them planning scenarios, integrate knowledge amongst not only ourselves, but also our colleagues, and start with some pilot interventions. The challenges we faced, however, were this institutional fragmentation and rigidity, these perception gaps of the population, and one of the major issues was also political uncertainty. So often having different levels of institutions having different political views. These were the results, which we'll reach at the end. But just to give you an idea of what was achieved, a few numbers, for instance, Article 86, which we'll see in depth later, but also the number of stakeholders that were involved over the years. So, and the number of institutional bodies that were involved in this process. So as BioValue progressed, we too, as MECPOM and MAFRA, we organized our workshop, and this was an X-curve. And it was particularly useful because it was the basis of everything. It, in a way, showed us and the stakeholders what was necessary to overcome and what was necessary to actually push forward to have a better livability of the river. Following that, we had the work tables. This is a small screenshot of what we actually presented to the stakeholders. We had, each segment had specific work tables where we showed examples all over Europe and the world of how a different approach was possible. And not only a river approach, we had even like some rethinking of the streets, of the paving, so everything more related to NBS in the approach of city planning. This led to one of the first milestones, which was actually integrating in the third segment, the Delta, what was a study, an analysis done by the University of Trento on the ecosystem services and how these could be integrated in what was the new and what will become the new hospital site of Trento. This was particularly useful because when we interface with our stakeholders, we showed not only what was there, but what could be beneficial to them one day. So luckily, this document was then integrated in the final tender, and hopefully we'll see some results in the future. Following this, we had our second workshop where through direct contact with the citizens, we had a survey to understand even further understand their perception of biodiversity. And this led us to some fundamental changes. So, move this again. We understood that we needed to integrate these key aspects in our planning instruments. And actually, BioValue happened at a very fortuitous time, because at the same time in Trento, we are revising our planning instruments. So in a way, BioValue and the Comune were working in a parallel way. So through all the activities, and you can see where we are today, we started defining and influencing each other. And this was the result. So the workshops, the work tables, and the integration in our planning documents. The first and foremost was the PRG, the Urban Master Plan, which in Article 86 integrated fully what those principles that were coming from the X-curve into our document. So really trying to preserve the naturalistic aspect of river and even enhance the qualities. Following that, we had the Piano del Verde, which is the Urban Green Master Plan, which specifically mentions BioValue in our page, and the approach that designers and planners should take when designing or redesigning riverbanks and riverbeds. As an outcome, we then created the manifesto. So the manifesto was a tool that we presented to stakeholders where visions of each segment, experiences, potential hotspots, the red ones, were shown and were used as guiding elements for them and for us on what the actual river could become. Even potential, like one of the major issues was, well, what happens when there's an extreme climatic event? That doesn't discourage people, actually. In other countries, they plan resiliency into their landscapes. Together with the work provided by the University of Trento, the mapping of urban ecosystem services, both the manifesto and this mapping will serve as a foundation for the actual master plan of interventions, the long-term master plan of interventions, which will focus on the entire length of the river inside the municipality. And these are some other milestones. So as of end of last year, we achieved this full integration in our planning instruments. So what do we leave behind? We had the chance to develop a documentary which is available to citizens and was actually very useful because many of them seeing these images and these parts of the river which are not usually accessible were astounded. They didn't know that this existed in their own city. And obviously the manifesto, as mentioned, became not a legislative document, but it became something that both citizens and planners are able to access and see. And actually the manifesto became a guideline for the first pilot project. So we are in the lower segments of the urban area in Trento, between urban and delta. And this is a particularly interesting point because, as you can see, we have the Fersina, but we also have another secondary stream, which is the Rio Salé. And the confluence was, for us, a good way to show what could be done. So through micro-meandering, through changing the riverbed, because, for instance, the Rio Salé is fully concrete, fully channelized with a concrete bed, introducing riverine vegetation to foster aquatic life. The aim here is to showcase what all of this process could lead to. And I'm happy to say that we are beginning already works for this pilot project, and hopefully will be the first of many. And this is a final perspective of hopefully what it will look like. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matteo. And thank you to the three arenas for sharing their what they've done, their thoughts, and very interesting even the order, because we have a MacPom with this federal context, regional context. Then we went to a municipal context that was MAFRA, and then we finish on this very this local perspective. And these also shared these different planning timelines. So different times to implement and think. And one thing that I just, before going to the discussion, to questions, I think yesterday on the discussion that you had was shared that one challenge that IPBES identified was this need also for having strong and transformative visions. And our arenas, the three of them worked with visions. And it was a very, very important step exactly to establish what would be the spatial planning process, incorporating, and with this view of integrating and enhancing biodiversity values. So that's finished with me. I don't intervene more. I just want to know if there's any question. Maybe if we go first online, is there any question online? So they want to follow our discussions, and just to open the floor. Do anyone wants to? Yep, of course.
Thank you very much. I want to repeat my question that I posed in the last session. And like you, for example, I think for two case studies, you mentioned the SEAs, the Strategic Environmental Assessments, which are usually a governmental-led process and which is not initiated like every now and then, but like at specific moments, right? And so there's like governmental dynamics. And I wonder just how you kind of connect with the project to that and how you convince them that including the project in these processes would produce an added value, or in other words, like, yeah, especially in Germany, I'm German myself, but I don't understand this kind of administrative behavior that I witness in the governmental run. Like they're usually very protective, like this is our process. Don't mess with us, don't interfere, don't give us information that might be inconvenient for us. So what was the experience there?
Is there maybe, if everyone agrees, let's just do these questions and answering by the time. Jenny, do you want to address the question? Have you heard it? And share your perspective?
Yes, thank you. Yves, is this you? I cannot see the person who spoke, so I have to go on the voice. Well, it's a very good question. Yes. So at the moment, it is very difficult to say if there's going to be an SEA happening in a way that we envision it, right? But what is, I think, an important aspect is that different actors can lobby for certain aspects to be taken into account. So when I spoke to the person that is responsible in the ministry to work on the climate protection law, of course, she was completely overwhelmed with even mentioning that the SEA at some point should happen, and how I could even come up with this at that moment where the law was not even there yet. But I think to have certain actors aware of the possibility to include it already in the beginning is already a step forward, because they can then, in meetings they have behind closed doors, mention it again and again, and at some point it might be becoming a relevant topic for people that take the decision then in the end, how to implement it, because of course there's different ways to do this. And if they see that it could be something that could, for example, enhance acceptance of decisions that are then taken, then it could be valuable for them as well. But of course, I hear you, and I see as well that there's not a lot of capacity, and they're also like worried about the political developments, and they struggle already to push through with the stuff that is kind of the absolute minimum. So yeah, there's of course these both sides of the stories, and yeah, it's not easy, but there is some people who are willing to at least try, and I think for these people this is valuable input. Thank you.
No? Okay. What we are doing in Mafra from last year, we are in the second revision of the master plan, so it's a new cycle of the planning process, and we start to take the two teams together, the team of the CIA and also the plannings together to develop the vision in the beginning of this process. So it was not very difficult to convince the politician agenda to do this stuff. So because in the Portuguese legislation that we have to done in the master plan, we have to done the CIA, but it doesn't say that we have to do it in the beginning. So it's like a concern, technical concern, but also now it's a politician concern to bring the teams together and work in the process to develop a proposal together. So we are in the beginning of that progress, but I think we will achieve good things. Also in some details plans that they are not obliged to do the CIA, even in projects that are not done in the municipality. We also define that it is an obligation that they have to do the CIA in this kind of projects. So it's what we are doing also. And I would like to say that maybe we are now changing something perspective also in the agenda of the politicians, because we are going to have elections in the October, I think, in the ending of this year. And we also are now seeing in the posters, the election posters, we are seeing the protect and enhance biodiversity. So I think we are changing something.
Okay. Thank you. And before going with you, let us go to the online participants. And we have a colleague from Portugal, Rita Bruno Soares, that wants to ask the Irenas, what solutions did you found to finance the instruments mentioned? If you have it, and were they public funding, public support, or did you manage to engage some private sector to help the implementation of such instruments? So maybe I will go by order. Jenny, do you want to address this question? Or, nope. Jenny, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Sorry,
yeah.
I missed
of course.
The question that is met in the chat, right?
In the chat, yeah.
Yes.
The last one.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's both. So there is public funding that is allocated, and that is of course or not of course, but that is the most important one. But also there are some private sector actors engaged, because some actors also see the need for change, like they see the push for climate protection being important, and then also the land use change that is coming with it, and they want to be on the forefront. So they are also investing, and they are, for example, partaking in these pioneer studies where production facilities are built up for example, packaging material from paludiculture products. and they are investing themselves as well. So there's often a combination of the two. So public funding is kind of like giving some incentive, but then the private sector is also putting in their share. And this is the same for the farming sector. Often this public funding does not cover all the costs. So it's often that the motivation is kind of there, and then you kind of pull together different funding opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
One more
Thank you,
thing, there's also the new, or not, it's not completely new still, but the certification for emission saving, and that also it's not taken up a momentum as much as we were hoping for, but it is still ongoing, and it's also diversified in a way that it is not only for peatland protection, but for also certain ecosystems and so on. And the interest, for example, by farmers to go into these markets is also there, because they also looking at diversifying their economic standing on different areas. So there is the need for these solutions, and I think they will become more and more important as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I will go to Mafra and then to Matteo if you want to address, if you have an answer for.
Okay. So it is mostly like Jenny says. So the most important part is from public funds. We also have the taxes fee and fees from the building projects, but the most part is from both.
Public funding, yeah. Matteo?
So in case of the pilot project, which we've seen, that is entirely a public funding operation where the municipality has already issued a third, more or less, of the funding, and will issue 2/3 more in the coming year. Another example, which I actually didn't show, is the canyon area where we plan to do this natural park, and there we are discussing both with the province, which is the major stakeholder in that case, but also with a private stakeholder, which is the Eco Museum, that has a revenue. When I mentioned the 40,000 actual visitors last year, that means an actual revenue, and the surplus, because it's a publicly owned land, of that revenue usually goes in neighboring areas for any type of public works. So we have opened the table to discuss to redirect this surplus to go directly in the maintenance and establishment of the public park.
Thank you so much. Now, yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Boris Barov. I work for Pensoft, a company specializing on communication and dissemination, and hence my question is related to the important role of communication with the public in all these projects. I wanted to ask if you have some really good examples to show about how you engaged the public in these what tend to be very bureaucratic processes of planning, and the challenge you faced and how you faced it to inform the public about. And I think the vision is one element of this communication, of course, presenting that vision, and manifesto, I think it was a good example of that. But I recall many good examples of, for example, using the concept of rewilding as a communication vehicle to engage the public, for example, in London, or the Olympics in Paris as a vehicle to improve water quality of the Seine River, and other examples like that. But I wonder what were the approaches you used to convince the public through communication to support this type of process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the three arenas wants to address the question? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, Sophia, we'll start with you.
I think one of the most important was to bring the people together. and to be in person with the workshops with the stakeholders was one of the most important communication process in the spatial planning process also. And also to show them, work with them, for example, with these different instruments, with the cards, and also showing them different pictures, for example, of Mafra. What scenario do you want in 2050? And we start working with them with different image of our municipality, of our arena, and people start to cutting the examples that they want to be connect to have a better place, or a place that they want to live in. So for us, the workshops were very important, and we also now are working in the terms of internet, and also to start to develop some data that people can use also. So, but I think the most important in the arena was the workshops for us. With the stakeholders and citizens, because we didn't also have with the stakeholders. We start with the stakeholders and then our colleagues in the municipality, and we would like to open that also with the municipalities and the citizens.
Yes. Well, in our case, first of all, we had to establish this network of stakeholders. So that was a very one-to-one kind of approach. We either knew some, or we actually, via maps and everything, we started analyzing who was there, what was there. So we established this connection, which then many of them were present at all these workshops. Obviously, the political side, in our case, in the municipality, was really pushing forward this aspect and communicating it. But I'd say the stakeholder network was, in the end, the essential part, because via that, they then even started writing on their own accord articles on BioValue. For instance, we have the Fishermen's Association, which produced, I think, a five-page in the yearly subscription magazine. So we had this very kind of bottom-up reality where there was a lot of dissemination. And obviously the media was a big help, because the manifesto was presented, the YouTube video was presented, and even like a year from when we presented it, there were people coming to us, oh, we saw the vision, we saw that. So they were really engaged, and I'd say the personality of it, really engagement of that was essential.
Yeah, Jenny, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you.
From your...
Thank you for that question. I think I would like to take 2 points out of the experience I had there in this arena. One is to be really open with what result is supposed to come out in the end, and that's not always easy for people with a scientific background, because or even yeah, from different agencies from the government, because you normally have an agenda in your head, right? And you want to go into like workshops and meetings with this specific objective, but to have like then really the open mind to say, okay, we are coming here together as equals, and we are looking at what we want out of this, and what we can agree on. I think that was very important. And then the second one is also to be very honest about it, what can come out in the end, like what is already given and what is still open. For example, there was a big consultation process. We didn't do that. So, but the consultation process for this climate protection law, I thought it was very well done, because it was always clear on what the purpose of it was, and what the voices that were put in by citizens or land users was actually what the purpose was, and how it was then in the end used. And I think then people have the opportunity to learn from each other, but they don't expect things that are like not possible. So I think these 2 aspects I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And if I may, just to have two additions, one specific for Mafra. There's one thing that speaks louder to it of everything, that is water. The water resource is very, very important and is strategic, not just because of its natural component, but as a driver of economic development. And one strategy for the first workshop was also to focus on water as a way to engage more people in the discussion, because it speaks the same for everyone. It speaks even more than just saying biodiversity. So that was one strategy to focus. And I think all the arenas also engage in that in terms of exploring what everyone understands from their context and be very context specific. It was not possible to have overall communication strategy that would be exactly the same for the arenas because they are very different in nature. But one thing that was common for everyone was the videos that icons with the arenas developed because of the visual representation of it. So the creation of the relationship from this visual aspect, and I think Chiara can add more than this.
Yes, just a quick reference to the German arena video. Of course, for Trento Arena and Mafra Arena, they did the work. With the German Arena, there was this difference. We had them, and as regards the legacy of the project, we finalized this video that could be leveraged to communicate in the future to stakeholders. We put together the voices of stakeholders of the territory, and it's something that can be used for further engagement and to pass the testimony in the future. And of course, the direct involvement of these partners there in loco was the main point, because as Margarita was saying, adopting just one approach for the three arenas was not the right strategy. We prefer to have yes, the involvement and the direct contribution and actually the activities made by the arena themselves.
Thank you so much, Chiara. And we are short in time, and we need to have the break. No? Oh, sorry, because there was a question. Okay, 2 questions. So we have time for 2 more questions? Yeah?
No, go ahead. No, I won't.
Okay, no, yes, I understand that we are going just with the question and answers, and then we're going for the lunch break. So we don't have any more the other. So we have some more time for the discussion. And I have 3 questions or comments actually that are related to also to the presentations we had before the coffee break. So the first is for what University of Trento presented, Lia presented this morning, about the need for the municipalities to have more personnel, to have more technical support and resources allocated for the process, for the planning process. So I'm wondering if you had also reflections on the scale of the municipalities. We saw this morning, I mean, Trento, Mafra, they are medium ones, no? But not very small. So of course, this is not the case for huge municipalities, which have a lot of resources more and interest, even economic interests. So I'm wondering if you have this kind of categorization and how to somehow break the inertia, because the small ones, of course, they need more resources and more technical advice, but it's also with the private incentives, it's more difficult to raise this kind of interest, because of course it's we are talking about small scale, I mean, cases. And regarding the case studies, I'm wondering, in Trento, in Mafra, and in Verpomen, can you say that they are autonomous now in this process as the legacy of the project, now that the project will end? How many instruments are really incorporated in the normal planning instruments? of the tools that you proposed as BioValue, because this goes to the legacy part. And then a comment of this morning also presentations on this designing, increasing the size of green areas and of the parks. And so we say that it's not enough just the size, and it is more about quality of the habitat and connectivity, which I really very much appreciated, because it's very important. And I think we need really to insist on this, because even when we design parks, usually it's for like recreation, but if they are intentionally designed, really change the outcomes. Probably there's not that much awareness on this. And one thing that was said, but this maybe we can say then in the closing part, is that, let's say, to think more about designing for biodiversity, but this has to be added, and biodiversity for what? But this will be probably the main message in the end, or one of the main aspects to be discussed. So basically on the scale of the municipalities, how the municipalities can proceed from now on, if they are autonomous. And yes, then this comment on the for what in the future. Sorry, maybe
I will start with you, Matteo, because you're
Or do you want to add something?
I may say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so as an external, then you can comment or revise. I would say, true, the magnitude of the economic efforts is important, but I would like to bring back the attention to the hospital project that Matteo mentioned. So that is a huge project for Trento. And if you compare the efforts in a first scenario with that one, they become significantly small. So for example, in the hospital, the idea of having some attention paid also to the interaction with the natural environments, also to the benefits of the same hospital, is virtually at no cost. Again, compared with the magnitude of the efforts, which include not only building a hospital, but also redesigning part of the mobility and stuff like that. So it's really a fraction of the overall cost. So I don't think it's such a big issue when you put it to scale with all the other activities. And maybe I'll comment also about the legacy, but again, Matteo will then give his own view. I think that two issues are quite important. The fact that they managed to have an article changed based on a project outcome is quite remarkable. And usually, those kind of changes are there to stay. So the next time around, somebody will explicitly have to remove it. And that takes a lot of effort. So the likelihood for that to happen are quite small in my view. And the same with the plan. So the Green Urban Plan, although it was, well, let's say a joint venture, or mostly done with a contribution of another Horizon Europe project, but still BioValue contributed to that. The important issue was to have it was the first Green Urban Plan for the city. And once you have one out there, then people and also institutions will ask for an update in the future. So it was important thing to have the first one out there. Even though there's not a mandatory requirement for having those plans, just a suggestion from the BD strategy. And there won't be likely a mandatory requirement to update it. The fact that we'll have it sometime will bring associations, maybe NGOs and citizens to say, well, now it's maybe from 5 years ago, why don't we do a new one? So I think in that terms, in that aspect, the legacy is probably quite substantial. About staff, maybe you can comment. Stuff. I mean
Let me just to add on the capacity of the municipalities, just to add that when I mentioned allocating resources, sometimes it's not new resources, sometimes it's just breaking the silos. So there are people already present in municipalities that can actually collaborate on these projects and have a part. And we did struggle a lot with the size of municipalities when working in Germany, because it was a regional arena. So a lot of municipalities were involved, and some of them were actually really small and lacked the required personnel to participate and engage. So our colleagues at CONO tried to do the best job liaising with the municipalities that were able to assign some time to discussing and thinking. So in that case, when they're small, there's need for new ones, but sometimes it's just a matter of breaking the silos and adding more collaboration.
Yes, as Leah says, people were there, projects were there, but I think the importance that has to be recognized to a project like BioValue project was that the municipality could invest that into a new resource in order to develop a shared vision and to go to each other institutional member and say, look, we're doing this, why don't we participate together? Concerning your question on independency, well, we actually started having these seeds of BioValue in other projects. When it comes to the Adige is this enormous, let's say, question in Trento, and we have at least another project that taking the experience from BioValue started integrating some of these aspects into it, but as well as a minor, let's say, minor river, or stream, which is the Rio Salé. We had citizens and stakeholders telling us, well, we had this idea out for 15 years of renaturalizing the Rio Salé. And now they actually saw how we are incorporating that. It is a small incorporation, but the fact that it's already out there is significant. And finally, I'd say establishing a healthy discourse with the province, especially with the Bacini Montani, which I didn't directly mention, but it's important to say that before these tables where we discuss with them, they were always seen as the threat to any project. But actually, by involving them from an early process, they gave us even inputs on how to handle things. So it was a very healthy contribution.
Okay, Sophia. Yep.
So I think we are not autonomous in the planning stuff, and I think it's a good thing not to be autonomous. One of the things that I was saying, it was something that we would like to continue to work and have a relationship with the researchers and the investigators, science, the people, because they have sometimes different ideas and we have problems to resolve. So it's important to have this relationship, because sometimes otherwise it's like we work in some kind of island and stay alone. And the different thing is the planning team already changed the mindset, but we need help to change the mindset of other departments and also of the political executive department.
Thank you. Jenny, do you want to address the question?
Yes, please. Thank you. Oops, sorry. I want to make one more addition, and that is, I think it's very important to strengthen boundary organizations. Like in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, there's like a peatland agency now, and there's also a peatland center at the university, and they are kind of trying to bridge the different sectors and the different perspectives by different actors. And I think projects like BioValue also strengthen these actors because it gives them kind of legitimacy from a higher level, from an EU level. It gives input. It also makes kind of sure their work is fed back into processes then in science and policy making. So I think the connection there is very important, and you can see it as well that there's a lot happening in the federal state, because they just developed a peatland strategy where there's also, for example, mentioned that more aspects of biodiversity are and climate protection are supposed to be happening in the education of people that can then work in the different agencies or can work in farms and stuff like that. So there is things happening, and yeah, I have the feeling that our project, even so it might just be a small small part in the whole puzzle, but still contributed to that push towards working together more, integrating more, and having more perspective pulled together. It is of course more effort and more more resource intensive, but then the outcome is of course much more robust. And I think this becomes apparent then as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I had prior a 15 minutes mismatch between the ending and the real ending, but now we are wrapping up. As I was saying, we have a break, a lunch break now. So I suggest to continue discussions and debates if needed, because I know there's still a question, I think, but we need to wrap it up. But we are closing now on our final conference of BioValue, and I will pass for final comments to our project coordinator, Maria, and Emanuela, our project officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarida. Maybe I'll suggest you. Yeah, perfect. To be the final. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you very much to all for these very engaging and interesting presentations and discussions. I think they were very effective because they were really going straight to the point. So you really condensed somehow this 3 years journey in a few hours. So congratulations for this. Well, I have a lot of comments, so I will try to condense them because otherwise, no. The first one is about the legacy. So we just discussed. So I'm just reconnecting to my last question and also to what I was mentioning at the very beginning. About now, I think that you have intangible and tangible results that can stay. So among the tangible kind of tangibles, we can say, for example, how the planning instruments or the new tools that you designed and you tested are incorporated and are to stay even in the legal frameworks. So the one case of Trento that you changed the article. So I would really encourage you to insist more on this and to see how you can really much more incorporate what you have in the long-lasting documents of the municipalities you worked with. And then you have all the more intangible ones you mentioned, the cooperation, the mindset, changing the mindset, the fact that you are planting seeds that are spreading then with new projects. So both Trento and Mafra, and also in the case of Mecklenburg, it was about this collaboration with collaboration for the future that gives also legitimacy on the peatland agency. So really try to think to structure also. I'm thinking also how the project is going to close and to then present the deliverables and the legacy, really tangible, intangible, what is going to stay, what needs still some collaboration and cooperation for the future. I'm happy, as Mafra said, okay, it's not autonomous, but it is good because you're still investing in collaboration with research and innovation, which makes me very happy because we are supporting research and innovation. But also in this case, think if it is not just a personal cooperation, but how this can be embedded somehow in the institutional legal framework, because if it is not, then once the person which is key, leaves the process, then you are starting from scratch. So whatever can stay, it's really something that is a legacy. The second point is more specific about all these financing and economic instruments and tools. These are key, and because in this moment, this is something that is really high in the agenda of the European Commission. And you know that, I mean, it was released in January 2025, the Draghi report, the EU Compass report on competitiveness. So much more what we had was, we had Green Deal, but also the Green Industrial Deal. So also the green discourse is going more and more also in the frame of competitiveness. So we have also a lot of now analysis and studies how to have incentives for for nature, for all these nature-based solutions, for transformative change. So this is really key. So the contribution as a feedback to policy of BioValue to this, to the analysis and to the new approach is key, because we can channel somehow what you're doing on biodiversity, also on the economic part, which is crucial, because otherwise the changes will not happen. So we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a real world, and we know how things works. And on this line, I think we can also mention something that was discussed yesterday in the cluster event from IPBES rapporteurs. It was about how really to make the change and the transformative change happening. And also it was discussed how to change the narrative. So on biodiversity, because it is not something just about the values, but really about the practices. And we saw them today, this morning. But on this, really, how can you change the narrative in a way, because we are on the same side. We all think that it's very good to change and to have more biodiversity. This morning, you were mentioning, better quality, connectivity, and planning and size of areas for biodiversity. But then biodiversity for what? So really, really, this is something that you have to highlight, which are the benefits of this, of having more biodiversity. And I think that also transformative change as a concept is not easy to be communicated, so to the stakeholders. And I can say also that this is very personal reflection, but from the brain point of view, for our brain, for what neuroscientists say, not all people are inclined to changes. It's the opposite. We are normally more conservative. We tend to repeat our habits. So really, you're proposing two concepts, transformative change and biodiversity. And both concepts are not equally understood and equally accepted. So really to change the narrative, to attract people and to work on this. So really, this is a suggestion for all the projects. We need this change in the narrative, because we know that otherwise some of our work and the work, valuable work of BioValue will not be mainstreamed. So this is my main recommendation, thinking more about really the benefits for people which are not on this aligned on our same values, that are not that much interested in biodiversity and in transforming our society. How can we encourage them to change their approach? So thank you very much. Again, congratulations for your results.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manuela, for your words and for being here with us the whole morning. I guess that we still have participants online. Yeah, which is very good. I'd like to start exactly from your words. One is about the change of narrative. In fact, yesterday was very encouraging. The meeting we had all day, promoted exactly by the Commission, where the topics that we discussed showed that there is, in fact, a concern about the change of narrative. I would say that BioValue started already with that change of narrative. So we've been already working for 3 years in an attempt to change the narrative, and I guess that from the show we had today, this morning, we're making progress. Of course, there's a lot to go and much more things to improve, but we definitely making progress, and I hope that our reports and the publications will leave a leverage to continuing in this process. This issue that you raise about biodiversity for what is interesting and intriguing at the same time. As I recall, when ecosystem services came up as a concept, nature conservation agencies or authorities in Portugal were in shock, because that was a form of distinguishing the different elements of biodiversity. And they considered that biodiversity would be important just by biodiversity and not because it was services that were useful from an anthropogenic perspective. So, you know, hearing now from the biodiversity EC coming this question, biodiversity for what, makes me very curious about what are going to be the answers to that question. Yeah, but nevertheless, well, unfortunately, we don't have time, but that would be a really interesting topic for a discussion. The other thing I wanted to say is that we definitely have new opportunities to come up, namely with nature restoration law. Margarida in particular has been very keen in grabbing and together with MAFRA to take this over as well. I think there will be a lot of opportunities with that to integrate also in spatial planning. And just to finalize and connect again to the IPBES framework of views, structures, and practices, I think we can say that we are dealing with all the three. I mean, if we look at the arenas, all of them identified visions and in many cases even influenced the vision and the views of different actors and particularly of decision makers. The structures is changing as well, and an excellent example is the Article 89 of the RGP in Trento, but also even, well, I know it's not that structural, but MAFRA is showing also signs of, also through the spatial planning and strategic assessment altogether. I guess that, Jenny, you would say that now you believe more perhaps in the process that you went through in MacPom than you were in the beginning, because in the beginning you were a bit hesitant about the success of all this. And I think from your words today that we can understand that there's been progress as well, and namely in practice. So the practice with all the examples we've seen in Trento, in MAFRA, and also in MacPom, we can see that we are, and BioValue has been contributing to this endeavor, to this aim, set up and challenged by IPBES. And I'm sure that we have a legacy that we'll try to make explicit in our documents. So thank you very much to all the participants, participants online, participants that have been here in the room already before and they've left already. There was an issue of timings between this session and the other sessions, but I won't get into that detail. And then finally, and very especially, thank you to all the team of BioValue, to Aalborg, to start with you this time, Aalborg University, to UFZ group team, to Trento team, to IST, of course, to ICONS, to Municipality of Trento, Municipality of MAFRA, CONAU. The only reason why you will last is because you're not sitting here and therefore you're not in front of my eyes, but last is not the least. And thank you very much for all the work that has been done. We haven't completely finished. We hopefully have 3 months extension, but we're still waiting to hear from our officers about that, but it's promising. And what? Not the office's decision, but office is doing all the best so that the final decision is positive. And well, enjoy lunch and enjoy the rest of the afternoon with a cluster conference program more enlarged, and tomorrow as well with the policy dialogue. And thank you very much once again. Thank you.